Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and welcome to our next session of Inspired Spirits. I'm honored today to be joined with Ashok Chokalingam, Master Head of Distilling at Amrut Distilleries, Global Ambassador, and also Head of Sales. Ashok, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for me having here, Raj. Really excited to be part of them. 40, 50 people. I hope to have fun with them.
Great. Hey, Ashok, your chosen profession was certainly not in the drinks industry. Tell us how you started working for Amrut.
It's a sort of fate, I would say. I would never ever thought that I would come and work in an alcohol industry in the first place. Forget about the whiskey industry. So when I went to study for my MBA in the UK, the owner of Amrut, Ricky, is also studying in the same university and same class as mine. So we were buddies. And then at that point in time, the Amrut single malt was not there. And when the Amrut distillery decided to launch a single malt in the global market, and they have asked me if I would be interested to work for them. So that is how I got into that. It's a mere coincidence or fate, however one want to call it.
Well, that's great. We're glad that happened, because certainly I'll get back in. I'll get later into about the inspiration and things you've done for Amrut single malts. But the distillery's just come from a 45-day COVID shutdown. How did that affect operations at the distillery?
I mean, as many of you know, that we had a complete lockdown of India for about 45 to 50 days in total. And then once it opened, it was like very difficult. We got to compile with a lot of standard operating procedures set forth by the union government. And then we got to literally go and clean everything back, because everything was shut down for 45 minutes, got rusted and so on. And then we have to sanitize the whole area. And then we got to work with 50% of the capacity to start with, in terms of the number of people who can work, and then the social distancing, all other thing that we have to compile with. That was a challenge. And then distillation, again, we can't start straight away. You got to mash, you got to ferment for a week. So it was like a slow burner to start with. Now we caught up with in terms of spread distillation is fine, going fine. But as far as the bottling is concerned, still we are working with 50% of the capacity, as we are not allowed to have more people.
So there's still distancing that will have to happen as far as the bottling facility, because I know that the bottling was done by hand and everyone was pretty close together. I gather that's not going to happen going forward.
At the moment, that is not happening for sure. For example, in a single malt bottling line, we were employing 30 people, 30. And then the 30 people were only producing 2,500 bottles a day. That's the maximum that what we can do, because all the labeling, everything is done by hand. Our late chairman had a vision that he doesn't want to automate everything. That was his theme always. And then he wanted to give employment to as many people as possible. So he said, I don't care. That's the legacy that still we are following, but I don't know for how long they can carry
on. So Ashok, you said that fate brought you to Amrut, and you met Rick, and he asked you to join, and you were really responsible for building the Amrut brand in the UK to start off with, and now the rest of the world. What challenges did you encounter in launching and building Amrut in the UK?
Now, what happened was, in 2004, if you had looked at the single malt whiskey space in particular, there wasn't any single malts apart from Scottish, Irish, and Japanese. Kavalan, for example, from Taiwan was not there. Penderin from Welsh just started in same year as we did in 2004. So there was nobody in that space apart from that what we call as a traditional nesting ground for whiskey. Uh, India was not one among them for sure. So the reason why we started to work from the UK market as our first global market was UK. Even today is like very mature single malt whiskey market, and then Scotland is part of the UK, which is hardcore whiskey single malt whiskey producing region. So our objective was like if we can get our product endorsed by the people in the UK, and then it will be much more easier for us to go elsewhere. And that's the reason why we started off with the UK. But I can tell you, it was a sheer hell. It wasn't easy at all. And at some point in time, I think 2007, we had a rethink whether we can pull off from this project completely and shelf it. And but unfortunately, we kept on going, and then we turned around things by doing a couple of things, which I can describe to you a little later. Then we have really turned around things, and then not only India now, you have American single malt, you have Taiwanese single malts, you have single malts produced in Sweden, Australia, New Zealand, everywhere, all around the world now.
That's great. So talk about the maturation process in India in general and at Amrut in particular.
Right. With regards to Amrut, if anyone asks me how different Amrut single malt is, and then my answer is a simple one line, which you could remember forever in life. I would say Amrut is a missing link between Scotland and Kentucky. So the reason why I say that is the mash bill, the way how we distill spirit is very similar to Scottish in terms of, for example, we use 100% malted barley and then double pot still distillation. But when it comes to maturation, we lean more towards Kentucky than Scotland. That's specific only to Amrut because we work in an environment where the relative humidity is very low year round. Humidity in Bangalore is average is 50% and less. And then our working temperature range, the lowest we have seen, for example, last year is 9 degrees Celsius. You can convert it into Fahrenheit and tell the people. And then the maximum is 40 degrees Celsius. If you look at the bandwidth of the temperature range that we work, is like 31-degree difference between the lowest what we have seen and the highest. So what happens is the cask expand during the summer and in particular daytime and contract during the night. So that put a lot of stress on the liquid that is maturing inside. So the wood extractive character on Amrut single malt is way higher than a Scotch single malt, for example, aged in a similar area, a similar time, but not far away from Kentucky, because in Kentucky you have a cold winter and hot summer as well. So that's how I describe. That's how different we are in terms of maturation.
That's interesting. That really makes a difference, and it gives you the benefit of being able to have your whiskey ready sooner, but obviously you lose more, so the yield is a lot less.
Yeah, our average angel share is 10% across the board.
Wow,
sometimes we 12, 13% as well.
That's incredible. That's really incredible. Somebody asked, Larry was asking, would you ever be able to get something older than 12 years?
I'm trying. The point is, regardless of whether it's a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 50-year-old, 20-year-old, doesn't matter. You got to have the balance right. And that is what I'm concerned with. We have pushed up to 12 years on our last bottling, like 3 years ago. And then I'm just wondering whether we can probably push it further. At the moment, the oldest cask that I have is exactly about 11 and a half years old. I'm just going to give it a go. The problem is I got to watch that barrel every 2 months, drop sample and make sure it's not extremely woody, more on the tannic side. And that's the key thing. Let's see. I don't know the answer for sure as of now, but I'm going to try.
That's great. Well, I know that'll be pretty exciting because I think you and I have talked about trying to push something older, especially with Amrut's 75th anniversary coming up in 2023. But I don't know if that'll be possible or not.
No, we are going to give it a go and try. Let's see.
Great. So a lot of your ideas have been instrumental in the development of some of the unique Amrut expressions. Tell us, for example, about intermediate sherry.
What happened was when we have had the regular single malt, which is 100% made from Indian barley, unpeated, and then we have a peated single malt made from Scottish barley, the fusion, the combination of both, and then the cask strength version of the peated and unpeated. This is what we have had historically. The very next variant to come out was intermediate sherry. We have sourced a fantastic Oloroso sherry cask in 2008. That was the first purchase. And then after we have matured our whiskey in an ex-bourbon barrel, we have transferred to Oloroso sherry cask. What we found is in just a span of 1.5 years, it was extremely on the fruitier side, more dominant with the sherry notes, and then we have completely lost the distillery character. So it was what we call is a sherry bomb, and there are many in the market. So we definitely did not want to bottle another sherry bomb from Amrut, and there is no unique future in that. So then what we have decided is like put it back into the same bourbon barrels and then see what happens. Interestingly, what had happened was after a couple of years of maturation in the bourbon barrel back, we found the balance was just awesome. You have the characters derived from the bourbon cask and from the sherry cask, absolutely balanced out and still maintaining the unique Amrut character. And that's how the intermediate sherry concept was born. It's a fact that the spirit was matured in a bourbon barrel and then in sherry cask back into bourbon barrel again. So I always call it as a sherry sandwich, either side of bourbon maturation and the Oloroso sherry cask in the middle. And you got the balance right, and it was awesome. So that's how intermediate sherry was born.
Now, that was a very popular whiskey, and I know that Jim Murray gave it 96.5 points, just shy of the 97 that Fusion received. And we have not seen intermediate sherry in a few years. Do you plan on bringing that back in?
Right. As you know, and many whiskey consumers possibly know, that the quality of the sherry casks that you get these days are not the same as what we have had in the past. And then there are two kinds of sherry cask available in the market. One is the historic one, where you basically show the cask from the bodegas, where whether in the case of Oloroso or Pedro Zemene, the wine was matured in the barrel for many years, ranging from 20 to 30 years. Now, because of the global demand on sherry cask and the more distilleries popping up around the world, there is a lot of stress on the supply of the historical cask. And then now the cooperages are buying the barrels and mature the barrels with the sherry cask, or rather season the cask for 3 or 4 years with the sherry, and then sell it to you as a seasoned one. And me personally, not interested in that. So it was very difficult for me to source historical sherry cask. That's why we have had a gap in between in terms of supply. Now I got some good cask back by paying some premium money to it, and you can expect a limited release of intermediate sherry at 57% in the US markets sometime next year.
That's great. Well, I know that a lot of the fans here and in other places will be really excited to get it. What about Katabam? That's this. I like to think of this as being the precursor to Spectrum. But tell us about Katabam and how that is made.
So what happened is, if you look at the whiskey market, whiskey finishing sherry cask, Oloroso or PX, very occasionally Fino, and brandy finish, rum finish. This is a typical stereotype done by every distillery. If I'm going to do any of those, I can do that, but there is nothing exciting about it. Now, as you know, we not only produce single malt, but also produce rum and brandy. So we had and have our own rum and brandy cask. So as an experiment, we just try to mature the whiskey in different barrels in sequence. For example, start the New Make spread with the ex-bourbon, move to Oloroso sherry cask, then let us put it in brandy cask and see what happened. Then that's how that experiment started. Then at the end of maturing the whiskey in 4 different barrels, it found like it's like extremely complex. It's not like you're blending all of them from one cask to the other. You are physically moving the whiskey from one barrel to the other, which is like laborsome. And initially we started with 4 or 5 barrels to see how things work. We found it extremely interesting, and then that's how the Kadambam single malt was born. The word Kadambam means mixer in South Indian language. That's why we named it, and even the label design also shows. And then we also had a little bit of peated malt in the total mix. I would say it's about 5 to 10%. So it gives a very mild hint of phenols, but not a big blow on the face with the peat. That's how Kadambam was born.
That's great. We have a question from Chris. Chris, I just posted it up here. What about single cask number 2699 sherry? Would you consider that too much sherry influence? He said, I thought it was amazing.
Right. Now, I'm not saying that we are not going to bottle sherry bomb. There are a lot of fans. And then with regards to single cask, there are 2 ways of maturing whiskey in sherry cask. One is basically build the basic skeleton of whiskey by maturing it in a bourbon barrel. Then you move it to sherry cask, and then mature it for as long as you want to, based on what kind of profile that you expect. And again, whether it's going to be a first fill sherry or second fill sherry or third fill sherry. And then the second option is maturing the New Make spread in the sherry cask itself. As you could imagine, because the barrel size is bigger, the sherry butt is 500 liter size, it's going to take a long time to mature. But you cannot expect a heavier body in the whiskey because the oak wood of the sherry buds are European oak, whereas the ex-bourbon is American. So American normally give you more of vanillin and natural caramel and build the body for the spread. Sherry cask is not going to give that. It's just going to be very thin and medium bodied. So it really depends on which direction you want to travel. So having said that, the majority or almost all the single cask sherry that we have bottled initially spend some good time in bourbon barrel where the basic skeleton is built, and then enhance further, either first, second, or third full sherry, which is going to determine how big the sherry is going to be. So I presume that 2699, I can't remember straight away from the head, probably is going to be a first full. So the sherry influence would be much bigger. Uh, and if you like it, there you go. There are some people who wanted to have the balance right, and some people wanted to have like old Glenfarclas, like heavy sherried one, right? It's like that. So if you like it, awesome.
That's great. Question from the Silver Lock Whiskey Club. They said, we understand that maturation is much faster in India with greater understanding and acceptability of lower age. Does Amrut plan to disclose on the label the age statement with that expression?
Right. It's a nice question indeed. And now, as I understood the market, there are two kinds of consumers. And one kind is people like you who wanted to possibly know every possible detail. I would think that you would love to start from how long that particular spirit was fermented, and then what was the middle cut, and how many barrels it went to. You would like to have as many details as possible. We can certainly do that. For the people like you, I can tell you, perhaps matured for 5 tropical Indian years, right? That means a lot. But an average consumer who walks into a supermarket or a normal liquor store, the moment you say an age statement of 5 years, and which carries a price tag of $60, so you'll be wondering, what the hell? Why should I pay $60 for a 5-year-old whiskey? And unfortunately, there is nobody going to be there to explain to them on maturation in India how different it is to Scotland and Kentucky. We don't have any guarantee like how many people on the shop floor is going to have a time to explain to the consumer. And that's the biggest challenge that we have in a broader perspective, which prevents us to put the age statement on the label. Otherwise, if anybody asks us, we tell them very honestly, it's age between 4 and 5 years. On the other hand, we have age expressions, Greedy Angels 8, 10 and 12, and then majority of the single cask that we bottle, we always disclose when it was filled, when it was bottled, how many bottles out and we have had. So we had to try to incorporate as much as possible. But for a mass market, from a marketing perspective, it's difficult for us to do that.
Yeah, and you're also seeing a lot of distilleries from Scotland going back to non-age statements. That whole phenomenon of having to have a minimum of 12 years old on a whiskey to satisfy consumer demand. I think a lot of that's changing because the whole concept of age statements didn't really come about until the 70s, when there was a growing demand in the U.S. for Scottish single malt. And I think people are learning that, hey, younger whiskeys can taste amazing.
Now, if you look at it, I don't want to put the name. Some Scottish distillery said age matters, right? On an advertisement platform about 6-7 years ago. And then the same distillery started to bottle a lot of NAS with a fancy name. I don't blame them for bottling NAS because that is the need of the hour. You don't have a mature stock because of the global demand on Scotch single malt, and single malt in general is too high. So we don't have a stock in Scotland. So how do you basically survive with your business? So you are forced to come up with NAS, probably mixing older and younger in a proportion that tastes right. That's fine. But as far as Amrut is concerned, right from the day one, our position being very constant. We said, as far as Amrut is concerned, age does not matter because the environment under which we maturing is totally different than what you see in Scotland and Ireland.
Yeah, I know. At a lot of shows, we always get people saying, "How old is that?" And I like to go try it first, and let's talk about maturity versus age, because certainly Amrut and things out of Taiwan, for example, and other places, they're a lot more mature than the age would allow you to believe. And I think people have fallen into this false trap of thinking that older is better, and we
Yeah,
all know that that's not necessarily the case.
that's exactly what I was about to tell you when you had asked the very first question of how did you manage to get Amrut established in the UK. So first 3 years we were like running like a headless chicken, focusing more on the Indian restaurant to sell the single malt. But sooner than later we realized that we are barking at the wrong tree. Then we basically took a couple of steps backward, and then decided to focus on core whiskey group, like people that we are addressing here. So what we have done is we have done a India versus Scotland blind tasting in 6 different cities in the UK, where we had invited people of this caliber for a blind tasting, right? So we pitched 3 well-known aged single malts paired against 3 of the Amruts, which is Amrut peated, Amrut single malt, and fusion, right? And then at the end of the 6-city tour, we have compiled the score. Amrut basically knocked down the 3 scotches absolutely hands down. And many of the hard-headed Scotch whiskey connoisseurs who came for those blind tasting were absolutely blown away,
Yeah.
because many of them have chosen Amrut over the Scotch single malt. So we made the point very clear to them. Our objective is not to make the Scotch single malts low. It's just to tell you how good our single malt is. Because of your prejudice, because it is coming from India, it has to be crap, right? So we
Yeah.
wanted to break that. And then the moment you tasted something, just to evaluated something based on your senses, rather than any psychological effect of looking at a label or considering the origin of the whiskey, and you were honest to yourself just by nosing and tasting a glass of whiskey like that without any branding, nothing in it. So that's what gave us a huge momentum and impetus that we have a good product. It's a question of getting into the minds of the people. So we started to do that time and again. Probably I would have done about like over 1,000 blind tastings, whiskey tastings in my career so far.
Yeah.
We took like, one block at a time. And then whoever came for this whiskey tasting learned so many things about, like, understood that making whiskey in different climatic conditions is going to be different, right? And then they also understood the underlying factor of losing an angel share of 10 to 12% compared to 2% in Scotland. So one at the expense of the other. So that's how we did it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, when I was first, when my business partners, Bill and Jane in Canada, called me up and said, "Hey, we have this Indian whiskey and they're interested in coming into the US." And my immediate reaction was, there's no good Indian whiskey. Indian whiskey's crap. It's the same thing, because younger, whenever I went to India and I'd go over to my cousins' homes, we'd be drinking, Officer's Choice, Royal Challenge, things like that. And I'm going, okay. I remember once in the 80s, McDowell's had a single malt that they had released. I don't know if it was a real single malt, but it was probably the best thing that was out there. But honestly, when I tasted Amrut, I immediately fell in love with it. I was blown away, and obviously staked my career on it. Went full hog in supporting it and building it in the US.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
So Gordon Homer has a comment. He says he's lost count of the number of people who have come up to him when he was doing whiskey shows for Amrut and asked, "Which is your oldest whiskey?" And we still get that. I mean, people just automatically come up and they want to know what's the oldest. And I think it's I think it's all, well, it's on the table. I mean, because everybody, all they want to do is try the oldest whiskey. They don't care what it is, anything else. It's just, I want to have the oldest. And that's too bad. And it's part of our roles, yours, mine, Gordon's, other people who are ambassadors for Amrut or any whiskey to educate the consumer about what it's all about.
Correct. I
So
mean, the funny thing is, I just recall one blind tasting that I have had in Germany. Uh, I think we had about 10-year-old Lefroy in the tasting, and then I had a 9-month-old peated cask strength, 9 month, matured in a virgin oak, and I carried that to the tasting. People were absolutely loving both in an equal measure, almost like head to head. A 9 month old compared with the 10-year-old big brother Lefroy, because I'm a fan of Lefroy as well, right?
yeah,
So they absolutely blown away. I mean, you would not have any idea of what you were drinking on a blind tasting. You can be easily fooled.
that's true. That's true. Let's. I'm sure people want to hear, but let's talk about Spectrum. This is the original first release, the 5, which came out a number of years ago. You can see I haven't opened this bottle, and a lot of people ask, when is Spectrum coming back? So let's tell everyone, Ashok, when is Spectrum coming back?
Next year, for sure.
Yeah.
I have the problem for me now is the expectations on Spectrum is so big, and when I release the next one, that particular bottling has to live up to that expectation, right? If not over, at least up to that expectation. Now, I wanted to make sure that we are bottling the right thing, and we don't want to rush it up. We have so much of pressure from uh, consumers in Europe and America on Spectrum. I have tasted the barrels like last month, and I believe that this can be bottled around April next year. You need another 1 year of maturation, and then we are done. So the first release, I think we have done 1,000 bottles, Spectrum 005. And then the next one is going to be 004. Then it'll be 5. So I think the numbers will be good next year. It's not going to be still like 100,000 bottles.
Right.
Yeah, at least like I think some 4,000 to 5,000 bottles worldwide. We can do it next year.
That's great. That's great. Jeff wanted to know that have you ever considered aging a whiskey, aging Amrut somewhere else other than in India? And I know that Two Continents was one where it's partially aged in India and partially aged in a secret maritime location that you can't disclose. But do you think that something like that would continue for the future?
We have already done 2, not 1. One is the Two Continents. Two Continents is also going to be released next year in a smaller number. The second one is we were allowed to disclose the location. That was the Amrut Herald, which was matured in an island in north coast of Germany called Helgoland. Now, I have shortlisted 2 more locations, possibly one in North America and one in Europe. Maybe we can have the different variations of 2 continents. So to answer to Jeff, we have certainly considered that, and we are working on it. The reason why we haven't carried forward as of today is the demand on Amrut is crazy in India.
Yeah.
We cannot even satisfy 1/5 of the demand. And that's the reason why we haven't taken that as a priority yet. But I think next year I'll do that.
That's great. The Truth Matters Limited wanted to know, going back to Spectrum, will you use the same stave types for the next 005 release?
Yes, it is essentially the same barrel with the second fill. And I haven't bought a new set yet. And but it's matured for a longer period to get that more sherry effect into the whiskey. That's the reason why I had to wait. We will continue with both the versions. It's like like anything else. Some people like the 4-stay version. Some people like the 5-stay version. So we have decided to continue with the both.
I know last year, Ashok, Amrut, because of the demand, opened their second distillery, which is right next to the first one. What has that done as far as capacity goes, and what is Amrut's production capacity now?
We were distilling 300,000 liters of alcohol with our old plant alone, which we had one sprit still and one wash still in working, and we had a one spare wash still just in case if something broke down, we could continuously run. That was the idea. The new facility, what we have done now, we have now tripled our capacity. So we have installed 2 more wash stills and 2 more sprit stills. So now we have gone up to 900,000 to 1 million liters. Whatever we want to produce, we can do it by running extra a day per week. That entirely depends on how we wanted to do it. So now our current capacity is 900K to 1 million liters.
And I know that when I was there in February, I saw that the new warehouse was getting pretty full, and I guess you're going to build another warehouse because you certainly need to put those casks away to get them to age.
At the moment, the warehouse number 7, on my last count, I need to fill about 90 barrels, and that's it, done.
Wow.
So the warehouse number 5 is about 5,000 barrels. All other warehouses put together is 5,000 barrels. So total 10. So now at the moment, we have initiated to construct warehouse number 8 to have an additional capacity of 5,000 barrels. And then warehouse number 9 will be next year for another 5,000. So we will be having a total inventory of 20,000 barrels, which will give me a total volume of about 100,000 cases of 9 liters. That's good enough. So that's what we wanted to achieve. If we can sell 100,000 cases of 9 liter as a malt whiskey, brilliant. And that's what our long-term strategy is.
That's great. Truth Matter Malters wants to know if you could enter only one of your whiskeys in a blind tasting to really showcase the Amrut taste, which would you enter?
Okay, I just wanted to be more specific on that question from him. Is it just portray what Amrut is about, or just impress?
Just to highlight the Amrut taste, the Amrut profile.
Oh, okay. The Amrut single malt 46%, or the cask strength 61.8. Both are unpeated, 100% Indian barley. The 46%, now I have made a bit of change in the way we bottle. In the past, we were bottling as and when we get an order from our customers, whether it is a Raj or from Europe. We'll just bottle whatever they ask for at that particular point in time. But now what I'm working on is a Solera system. So I have already picked up the barrels with respective ages, dumped them into a Solera tank, and then if I'm bottling, say, 250 cases for the US this month, and maybe within the next 10 days, I'll dump 250 cases equivalent liquid back into the system. So what's going to happen is the consistency is going to be like more uniform, which was not the case before, because every batch was different in terms of the barrels that we pull the whiskey from, the batch size, everything basically makes it different. To answer that particular question, you can try the single malt 46%, which is unchill filtered, uncolored, 92 proof, or the cask strength, which is like a kind of big masculine whiskey. It's amazing. You will be shell shocked at 61.8%. It doesn't have any harshness, a lot of body, a lot of character.
Yeah, and the nice thing is that those are whiskeys that are the foundation for everything, except obviously the peated whiskeys. But all of the other releases that Amrut does, it's the cask strength single malt that forms the base of it.
Exactly. That is a fundamental building block for us. Yeah.
Right. I know you're not going to answer this, but Chris wants to know, where was the Amrut single grain distilled?
It was in our neighboring state. Now, there are many ways of doing. I mean, it was an experiment that we did, and I would say, unfortunately, it worked out so well, and everybody is basically pouncing on us for more and more. We have bottled only 5 casks in total. Now I have laid off more. To answer that question, it came from our neighboring state, probably about 500 kilometers from where we are. That's where we source the spirit from. And then, but we managed to mature it in a nice way, proper, full bourbon barrel.
And I know that yield was pretty low, because the cask we got 108 bottles or something from it. So
maturation loss.
Yeah.
Maturation loss was it was on the top tier, unfortunately, and since we are not allowed to bottle at cask strength of say 70% alcohol, I remember one of those barrels, although it's aged for like 7 years, already went to 71% alcohol. That's like 142 proof in 7 years from 125, right? It's like a massive jump in terms of the alcohol concentration in the cask. But there will be more releases in the future. I'm certainly working on that now.
Any plans to distill your grain?
We can certainly do that. Now I have put my head on like 3-4 different projects, which out of which 2 seems to be like super promising. And so this year we are going to have 2 or 3 new releases for the fall. And then next year, Spectrum is coming for sure. And then possibly one more brand new, like out of the box whiskey, totally out of the box.
Yeah, I won't tell anybody what it is yet, but
not yet.
I know it'll be great. So last year, Ashok, you Surinder Kumar retired as head of distilling, and you took over that responsibility. What changes have you made to the way that Amrut is being distilled?
2 immediate changes that I've done is like one is I built a Solera for single malt and cask strength, and then another one is I have built another Solera for fusion. So both of them are going to be like a super consistent going forward on every bottling. And then on the new plant, have done quite a bit of experimentation with fermentation and distillation. And now I would tell I'm producing like much more fruitier spirit in our new plant. Old plant, I haven't touched anything. I just let it run as it is with our past legacy. But the new plant is producing like a super fruity spirit. I think when it matured, it's going to be awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was fortunate enough.
And then fermentation. Now I have moved away from 5 days to 7 days. So I'm fermenting 2 days extra to have more flavors coming through on the new mix spread.
Is that giving you a second fermentation?
What we call is a secondary flavor development. Now,
right.
If you look at majority of the distilleries, what I call is a big boys in Scotland, normally fermented for 3 or 4 days max. Sometimes outer limit 5 days. But nobody generally mature it for 7 days. We are not at that kind of pressure to produce more spirit. 900,000 liters a year, we are more than happy. So I can afford to ferment for a couple of days more. So 7 days of fermentation certainly gives a much better flavor than 5 days.
Yeah, I know when I was there in August, I was able to try the new make, and it was spectacular. And I think what I'll do next time is we'll get some bottles of new make so that we can use those in tastings to showcase how Amrut develops over time.
I can do maybe on the next container, put a couple of cases for you and then you can give it to the guys to have a taste of what we are talking about.
Yep. A compliment from Truth Melters, which is Larry's group from Taiwan. He just wanted to say, keep up the great work. You guys have erased the stigma that India cannot create a fantastic whiskey.
Yes, I think I have said in the past. Now a couple of more distilleries from India is playing on the global market. I think another two or three is going to enter into the market. So I would say we will have our own category of like Indian single malt, like Japanese single malt or American single malt. That day is not far away, sooner than later.
Yeah, and
But I think we have taken the pain of being the first mover into the market, taken all that beatings and frustrations and you name it. But now it's going to help the others because that social stigma is not there anymore as much as what we have faced.
yeah, that's true. I mean, like you said, Amrut was the pioneer in this and the first one to launch an export single malt from India. And now, like you said, there's 4 or 5 others out there. Where do you see the whole category going?
I think this category is going to be a stronger one. Maybe if I have to put a timeline, 5 to 10 years, it will be good.
It'll be, yeah, it's
Good.
interesting because Japan is going through some challenges right now because a lot of there's a push to try and have a Japanese whiskey category developed, an agreement from all the distillers about how to do it, because a lot of us know Japanese whiskey, there's no rules, and some of the stuff that comes out of there in some cases has imported whiskey added to it. Nika is very honest in saying that, and some others. And I think that there is a movement within some of the Indian distilleries to have some agreement about what single malt means. Is that correct?
Okay. As far as Japan is concerned, it's a kind of a open secret. But what we have done, Rajesh, I mean, to be very honest with you, we can do anything to get away when it comes to whiskey, when I sell it in India. However, we have a new governing body like your FDA, FSSAI, which is a Food Standard Safety Agency of India, which has a clear defined definition of what a whiskey has to be, what a brandy has to be, etc. But when it comes to single malt, the moment if I'm going to sell my bottle in Europe, I have to compile with what the EU legislation on single malt is. And then with regards to America, what we have gone through, right? It's basically cut and paste of what Scotch single malt is in terms of the legislation. For example, not using exogenous enzymes for mashing and fermentation, and then using only oak barrels for maturation, and then the size of the oak barrel, the minimum period of maturation, etc. Everything is complied to as far as what EU legislation for single malt is. So then all other single malt producers who wanted to sell it in Europe and America are obviously following the same regulations set forth. So from that perspective, we are very safe. And there are other Indian whiskies available in the US market, which is what we call as Indian-made foreign liquor, made from either a molasses spirit or a grain spirit, and mixed with Scotch single malts or Indian malt, and caramelized and bottled. So that is still available. But single malt is concerned, I think probably there is a possibility that we will form an association like Scotch Whisky Association, Indian Single Malt Distillers Association, which probably will govern the rules and regulations when we go out and sell a single malt.
That's great. Hey, Ashok, what's your favorite non-Amrut whiskey to drink?
Which region?
Well, it can be anywhere. I mean, I know you mentioned Lefroy a minute ago, but
I mean, I'm not saying this because addressing a bunch of Americans here. I'm a huge fan of bourbons, right? And you look what I killed here. Blanton's is killed.
Yeah.
I'm just going to kill the old charter.
Yeah.
And then I have some Abarla here. But I have about 70 bottles of bourbon yet to be opened. With regards to single malt, I like quite a few of them. It's very hard to describe. If I have to say from Islay, it's Lefroy is what my favorite is. If it is from Speyside, not many people will say that. It's going to be Cragganmore.
Yeah.
And and from Highlands, I like a Glenfarclas, right? So Lowlands, probably Bladnoch is an underdog for me, so it's a good one. So it depends on the region.
Yeah. Annabelle has a comment here. Says, "What's the most important factor in a distillery? Cleanliness or clean equipment? Do you agree, or something else?"
You don't want to be too clean. I need a bit of dirt because that contributes to the flavor. For example, little bit of bacterial contamination is good. Sometimes we produce a component called diacetyl. If it is within the threshold, you'll get like a lot of butterscotchy note in the spread. If it is over the board, you will produce a nail polish and varnish, right? So a little bit of contamination is good. You don't want to be too clean. What is important from the cleanliness is you got to ferment it completely. That means the gravity of the wort has to be 0 and below. And that's number one. And in addition to that, long fermentations, you can play around fermentation temperature, yeast pitching, how fast you want to do the fermentation. You can play around. But to answer that particular question, hygiene is important, but not too hygiene.
You need some runners. Silverlock Whiskey Club wanted to know, which Lefroy do you like?
Okay. When Lefroy quarter cask was introduced, I would tell it was like around 2005, I think, when Ricky and I were in Glasgow. We got a bottle from Oddbins, and then we killed that bottle in 2 days, like one full bottle, two of us, and that good it was. But that quarter cask is perhaps not the same now. And then standard 10-year-old is like is anytime is good. And then you can go at the higher expressions, provided you can afford. I have tried many of them, but this is like, affordable daily dram for me.
Great. I'm going to bring Larry Schoen in from Taiwan. He wanted to add a couple of things, so I'm just going to add him to the stream here. Here, Larry.
Hey, Ashok, how you doing? Cheers, Raj.
Hey, Larry. How are you, buddy?
How have you been? Doing pretty good?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, very good, very good. I just wanted to comment on one thing you had mentioned earlier there. You had said about Amrut being the first Indian whiskey, and you guys were pretty much used as the guinea pig, so to speak, and you showed everyone it was possible and stuff. But from doing that, I'm wondering which of your whiskeys that you produced are you most proud of, that you really feel that kind of speaks for Amrut and speaks for what you guys have done
there? In terms of the global success, Amrut Fusion is our breadwinner even today. And I just like, probably you are one classic example for that. It's like Fusion is a child born for a Scottish mother and Indian father. Right? That's how I put it. Like it's like a best of the both worlds, which came together, and now it's raised in India. Right? So you can imagine a kid was born, and that's exactly what it is. So we are very proud of what that particular brand has done, and it has a mystical complexity. And you taste the Peter single malt separately and then Indian single malt separately. Definitely, it is not the same.
Well, I've been sitting here talking the whole time, or listening to you guys talking. I mean, I have the Spectrum here, the 12-year Confusion, Naranj, and I'm going through it all, tasting. I'm just blown away by everything. It's so different, yet it all has your unique flavor from your new make and stuff. And congrats to you guys. You're killing it worldwide, and I wish you guys the best of success everywhere.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
Larry.
you for being a good fan of Amrut all these years. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
I have to. This stuff's amazing.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to take you off, Larry. Ashok, that was great. I know. I just had one other question for you. I know that when you had spent time in Scotland, going around, that you did have the opportunity to visit a lot of distilleries and learn from them, because you were, let's face it, you were a newbie, a novice to whiskey and whiskey distilling. So, which of the distilleries had the most impact on you, and which did you learn the most from?
You would say like you pick up different things from different people. There are a couple of things like I was fascinated about. I don't know how many of you been to Fetterkane distillery in Aberdeenshire. They have like a very funny system of creating more reflux in the still. There's a line of water running around on the outside of the still from the top, which basically makes that area cooler. So the vapors basically condense midway and then fall back inside the still, because the outer shell of the conical area of the still is chilled by pouring water from the side on the top. That was fascinating in terms of creating like more reflux. There is another way of doing it is, for example, what is there in the odd bag, still a little kind of a breather. So this is like opened my eyes in terms of how reflux in the spirit can be created and altered, whereby you can produce a heavy spirit or light spirit. And then with regards to fermentation, I was fascinated by the, especially the mashing, fascinated by the cast iron mash tun in Brooklyn. That was like absolutely like awesome. So not necessarily from one. I have picked up like many things. Even for example, Spectrum. I just like picked that idea from the market, right? So I always wanted to break that tradition and legacy and create something out of the box. So the Spectrum idea came like, why everybody is like finishing a whiskey in a sherry cask or rum cask? Why not create a multiple flair from one single cask? So that is what the thought process was. Then the question of how to get the barrel done. And since it is a family-owned distillery for us, we can literally go and try anything and everything. We are not afraid of failing. And then, outer limit, I need to buy like 5 barrels and then probably got to waste 1,000 liters of spirit. That's what going to cost me at the end. And then my turnaround time is way faster than Scotland. I don't need to wait for 12 years to know how the whiskey is going to taste. In 3 years' time, I know where exactly it is heading towards. So that's what it is.
Annabelle's asking, have you considered a Sauterne cask?
Yes, I did. And I mean, I just, it's an open secret. 2 barrels I put in about a year and a half ago. I think it's going in the right direction. Let's see.
And Larry wants to know, do you have any temperature control in your maturation warehouse? I mean, I think we always like to say that it's the warehouses are controlled by the climate itself. So whatever the natural climate is what's done. Because there's no cooling or water or insulation in the warehouses to affect the aging process.
No. My point of view is also to not to work against nature, regardless of what it is. There are some warehouses in Kentucky where you have hot stream steam is basically passed into the warehouse during the cold winter to have a uniformity of the temperature year round, is what I was told. I have seen it in some warehouses. However, what we have done is the month of December, January, February, March, the humidity is horrible. We went as low as 16, 17 percentage of relative humidity. When it is 17 percentage of relative humidity, you can imagine like the skin will be absolutely kind of peeling. Then imagine about the cask. So you lose a lot of moisture from the barrel. That's the time where the strength basically goes up drastically inside the cask, because you're losing more moisture from the barrel along with the alcohol, so pushing the strength up. So we wanted to know how the whiskey will behave if the humidity is increased. So we have created a small experimental area and put a humidifier and then ran it for about 4 or 5 years. And what we found is it took a longer time to mature. And then normally in a humid environment, you'll get like more floral character in the whiskey. And the floral character that what we got for humidifying and the cost associated with running the humidifier, there was no proportion. So then we have abandoned that project. That's the only one experiment we have done.
Another question from Albal is, have you ever considered a Mizunura cask? And with the Indian distillate, how would that do in a hot environment?
To be very honest with you, straight away, we said no to Mizunura cask for only one reason. Approximate cost of one barrel is $5,000.
Yep.
Right? Now, what am I going to do by just maturing one barrel? It's not going to go anywhere. And I can't afford to buy 10 barrels by spending like $50,000. For $50,000, I can buy 3 containers of good American bourbon barrel. So that's the reason why we were not interested. That's mainly because of the cost.
Do you? I know that you and Rick have spent some time in Kentucky sourcing ex-bourbon barrels. Do you have a preference as to which ex-bourbon barrels you prefer?
For me, the best barrel that I've seen so far is Tennessee cask, Jack Daniels. I don't know what the reason. Maybe Brown-Forman has its own cooperage, makes their own barrel. We've been to that cooperage as well, and we have seen how they're manufacturing their Virginia cask. And so far, I have seen that it is awesome. Jim Beam is not bad. And then Buffalo Trace is good. Four Roses we have tried. So we have barrels from like all the distilleries. When the barrel supply is in turbulence, you will know who your real friends are. I think we have faced this problem about like 5 years ago. Literally, it was impossible to buy bourbon barrel. The demand was so crazy. Everybody was like screaming. Then we have decided to basically stick with somebody and then still get a constant and good quality supply of barrel. So we have done that.
That's great. Annabelle said, Silverlock Whiskey Club, have you considered a Darjeeling tea seasoned cask like the Grant Tea from Akmera in Sweden?
Not yet.
But don't leave anything out, as they say, because
as I said, like we have multiple projects is going on at the moment. I think there is a possibility of like one release at least next year, which can blow your socks off. I'm hopeful.
So people want to know, Ashok, what's in your glass? What are you drinking right now?
Oh, I just killed a bottle of Fusion. Yeah, I can show the bottle just now.
There you go. Nice. Nice.
Uh,
I've got some of the single grain in it in my glass, the Amrut single grain, because I think it's still morning here. Well, it's just turned noon, so this is a great breakfast dram, I think, or a great noontime.
no, I had to blame you, Raj. You have taken everything from here.
Not enough, Ashok. All right, we're winding down. If anybody has any questions, please throw them in the comments section. We got a couple of more minutes so we can ask. And if I think Josh is showing that he's drinking the, are you drinking, Josh? The Porta Nova. Yeah, nice. Yeah, Porta Nova is delicious. Anybody else drinking anything special? But this has been great. Ashok, as always, thanks, bye, for doing this. I know it's almost 9 o'clock there, but it's still early for you. So thanks a lot. Say hi to the family and all the best. Cheers.
Thank you so much. Thanks for everyone to be part of us today. Stay healthy. God bless you all. Thank you so much.